think about alfalfa, a lot of times farmers say, well, I'm just going to cut it in a couple of weeks. I'm not going to worry about the bugs so much, or I'm not going to worry about annual weeds so much. And disease control, well, if I get a little problem again, I'm just going to cut it in a few weeks. But that's really not the way to look at it, especially if you want to get high quality, dairy quality hay.
And get the most tonnage and have your stand last the longest. So just like any crop out there, the more management you put to it, chances are the better that overall crop is going to be. And yes, quality is a factor, length of the stand is a factor, tonnage is a factor, all these things really matter. So today we wanted to focus here on not just the weed control end of things, but also talk a little bit about diseases and insects as well.
With alfalfa, there's a number of things you can do, and I'm excited about that particular crop because you get to harvest it multiple times throughout the season. With something like corn or soybeans or wheat, if you make a mistake, well, you got to wait till next year to try and do things right. With alfalfa, well, the next cutting, let's do it a little different, and hopefully we can get a return on investment. So you can certainly be analyzing things as you go through the year. With weed control, as you're planting alfalfa, we really like to start with a pre-emerge herbicide like Eptam. Use a good strong rate of Eptam. You can control the weeds and be safe to that alfalfa. That helps you get a thicker stand. And a thicker stand that first year is going to make up for a lot of things going down the road. Once you have a thin stand, you're always going to have more issues with weed control and other problems, and it's just really tough to overcome. So make sure you start out with a pre-emerge herbicide. It's a great way to go. Now, if you've already got an established stand of alfalfa, so you're just worried about post-emerge control, your primary weed killers are either Pursuiteraptor or Buctril. Now with Pursuiteraptor, they are ALS family products, and they have some pretty good residual, so you'll get some weed control for maybe a couple of weeks or more after an application. With Buctril, it's just a contact killer, but it's a fairly unique photosynthesis inhibitor that's just going to go and smoke those weeds right now, and you aren't going to have to worry about any kind of soil residual if you do rotate to something else.
And with either one of those products, you certainly can throw an ounce or two of Butirac with it. It's going to be hot. Butirac is 2,4-DB, but if you have certain weeds that you just can't get under control, let's say it's water hemp, for example, that Pursuiteraptor aren't going to kill because the water hemp's probably ALS resistant, and the Buctril's not going to kill because Buctril's not very good on the pigweed species in general, you might want to throw that ounce or two of Butirac with it. The other thing I was going to mention, Darren talked about Eptam. We love Eptam. Use it at a half a gallon per acre in most cases. Just look at the rate for your area. But I would tell you, you've got to incorporate that instantly. Don't think you can spray it on with the sprayer and work it in later. It's not going to happen. A lot of it will go up in the air even in 10 minutes. So you've got to make sure you're instantly incorporating Eptam, and it's a fantastic product.
When it comes to killing grasses post-emergent alfalfa, it's actually fairly easy for the annual grasses anyway. With perennial grasses like quackgrass, there's really no good answer, but we can use a high rate of products like Select Max to take out annual grasses for sure, and maybe ding up those perennials a little bit to try and get us by for another year.
The last area in terms of herbicides I guess we could discuss is the products that could be used when the alfalfa is dormant. Now, we're not real big on this. Personally, my feeling is if you need to use a Metribuzin or a Velpar or something like that when the alfalfa is dormant, there's going to be a lot of damage done. Even though the alfalfa is dormant, it's going to end up hurting your stand, in my opinion, in a lot of cases. So if it was me, I'd tear the stand up and start over. But you certainly can use those. They are labeled, and there are a few other products as well labeled for dormant use.
All right, let's switch gears here a little bit and talk about disease control. Over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of work done on using fungicides to control disease in alfalfa. One of the most exciting things that I've seen is using it very early. Once we get about 6 or 8 inches of regrowth, at that point, we can get pretty good coverage with our fungicides down to those lowest leaves. Once the alfalfa gets much bigger than that, it's tough to get protection all the way down. And with fungicides, they typically just move in the xylem of the plant, which means they can only move up. So to cover those lower leaves, you have to get good spray coverage. None of that fungicide is going to move down systemically through the plant. So spraying it 6 or 8 inches tall, now we can protect those lower leaves. And as our alfalfa gets bigger, we can hold the leaves on the whole plant. Products like Headline have been used, but there are many other fungicides out there too. Take a look at some of the studies online. You'll find some from your area. The yield data and, like I say, the relative feed value has been pretty positive.
Well, in addition to just disease control too, keep in mind that some of these products offer other benefits called plant health. This is especially associated with the strobilurin products like Avito and Quadris and Headline and all these different crops, but Headline has been, at least so far, the most popular product of choice in alfalfa.
All right, let's talk about insects just a little bit, because if you're raising alfalfa, chances are you have a sweep net probably riding with you in the pickup every day throughout the summer, because there are bugs in alfalfa just all the time, all the way through the season. It's just figuring out exactly which bugs they are, if they're up to an economic threshold, and if it's worth treating. Now, fortunately, the price of many of the insecticides has come way down in the last decade, and now many of the pyrethroids that we're using may only cost $2 or $3 an acre. Because of that, and the price of alfalfa, it certainly doesn't take many insects at all to reach an economic threshold if you're using today's numbers rather than relying on some old data that was 10 or 20 years old.
So what we would encourage you to do is spray before that first cutting. You're probably going to have to spray at least 7 days in advance because of the 7-day pre-harvest interval that many of these insecticides have in alfalfa. And we want you to do that because if you don't kill the bugs first, you're going to have to wait after you cut to get that hay off, and it's probably not going to be a good situation because by then the alfalfa weevil larvae are just destroying your crop out there. You don't want to see that happen. Like Darren said, a lot of these pyrethroids are very inexpensive. Products like Silencer and Declare, for example, $2 or $3 an acre. They will do a great job on alfalfa weevil larvae. They'll do a great job on potato leafhoppers. They'll do a great job on most insects that you will have on your farm in alfalfa, but they're not real great on alfalfa weevil adults. So I would prefer Lorsban in that case at a high rate, or just make sure you're using the maximum labeled rate of one of the pyrethroids. That's probably the insect that we have the most problem with in terms of control if you're just using a low rate of a cheap pyrethroid.
Well, there's certainly a lot of things you can do in alfalfa production. We didn't even get into fertility, and there's a lot of things going on there in between cuttings with some foliar treatments and so forth. But when it comes to managing your alfalfa for high yield and also for good relative feed value, we need to start with a great weed control program, both pre and post-emerge. Then we come back with good disease control and stop the insects early, because the thresholds have really come down with the price of alfalfa going up and also with the price of insecticides coming way down too.
Well, one of the weeds you may see in your alfalfa field could be our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?